Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special year-end edition of the France 24 debate. What happens when an always-on-the-go planet finds itself grounded? A year ago at this time, we were wondering how to slow down, reduce our carbon footprints, explore concepts like flight shaming and questioning the sense of humanity's insistence on red-eye flights for business and package holidays at the other end of the globe. Then in March, Mother Nature made the decision for us. What did we learn while housebound or when forced to vacation nearer to home? Will the end of the pandemic signal a rush for the airport? How will we remember this time when we were, forced to slow down? Or you could ask, did we slow down? While physically grounded, humanity somehow found itself more connected than ever. All those classes over Zoom, all that office work over Microsoft Teams, all those live concerts on YouTube. What impact on our brains? What's all this staying in place in the digital age doing to us? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking the question to world traveler extraordinaire Sunny Kapoor, managing director of the think tank Redefine. Thanks for being with us, Sunny. You're in Oslo, Norway, where you've been since?
February the 29th this year.
And this is not normal for you?
No, it's cold turkey. I was doing 4.5 flights a week for the past 12 years and a complete dead halt.
All right, we're going to ask you how you feel about it at the end of this year in a moment. Also joining us from Washington, Yelena Kekmanovic, founder and director of the Arlington, D.C. Behavior Therapy Institute, adjunct professor as well at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show.
And we will be asking you about whether we're at heart nomads or sedentary animals. The French capital without travelers sounds like the perfect nightmare for tour guide Bertrand Dallemont, co-founder of My Private Paris. How are you holding up, Bertrand?
Well, happy to be here on the show, and it's going to be fine.
Okay. The open road is his business model. Joining us from the Canary Islands is Benoit Panel, CEO of Yescapa. Tell us what Yescapa is.
Well, hi to everybody. Yescapa is the European marketplace for camper van travels. We are connecting 9,000 local owners of camper vans from whom you can rent their vehicle for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Up to you.
All right, an Airbnb for RVs. Benoit, we'll be asking you more about how that's been holding up in this year unlike any other. Just to remind our viewers, the France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag is F24debate. Yeah, talk about being grounded in 2020. Last Sunday, the UK's great annual migration, that rush to be home for Christmas, took on a whole new urgency when several EU states slapped a temporary ban on cross-channel travel to assess this new strain of coronavirus. Sunny Kapoor, it's sort of a year bookended by shocks when it comes to that. And your thoughts when you heard about this sort of Christmas de facto being cancelled in the UK?
I'm as you know, a British citizen, and I can not but just completely empathize and feel sorry for my fellow countrymen. This really is the worst year in living memory by all standards, the worst December, and coming after, what's been a terrible 2 or 3 years since the Brexit vote, at the cusp of what is going to be a very hard stop Brexit, whether there is a deal or not. And on top of that, the new strain of the coronavirus and further blockages. If you saw the video circulating round of the traffic jams, the 50-mile-long traffic backup of lorries at the French-British border as people were stocking up in preparation for the hard Brexit. And on top of that, take this hard stop, the closure of the French border. It's a complete logistical, humanitarian, psychological nightmare for the UK. Probably the worst place to be in the world, in Europe not in the world right now, with no light at the end of the tunnel in sight for a long, long time to come.
Well, let's talk about where you are inside the Kapoor household, and it's. How does it feel at the end of this year? Did you feel, first of all, when you think about, you mentioned at the outset how much you're used to traveling for business, most notably. How did it feel staying put? Did you work less, more?
Well, I've been through many phases. So I was lucky in having had a little baby girl on the 19th of March in Oslo at peak lockdown. So that really, really helped. I had someone to put all my attention to. And in any case, I would probably have been, I tried not to be too absent a father. I would have been home far more over the last few months. So every time I even think about travel, I just sort of try and divert my attention away from that, because I'm also completely stuck away from family. So we have a baby girl who's 9 months old. She has not seen any other member of the family. We have family in Austin, we have family in Sweden, we have family in New Delhi and in Thailand. And we have not been able to travel to see anybody at all. So psychologically, it's been very hard. And on top of that, this has been a horrible year.
Hard for you or hard for her?
Well, she's too young to know, but I see the difference. I have a 3.5-year-old boy who, by the time he was this age, had been to the States and India several times and seen family. And she's decidedly far less social because, of course, she hasn't seen, leave alone family, hardly any people in Oslo. And this obviously will leave some sort of a mark. Early years, how much exposure you get to people, how social you are. I hope it's not permanent, but it's hard for the whole family. But at the same time, we realize we are amongst the luckiest people alive at this point of time in the world. We have no serious health problems in the family. We haven't lost jobs. And, we intellectually speaking, we're in some position to influence the policy decision. So there's always a reason to jump out of bed. But it is hard for everybody and, less hard for us. But we see how hard it is for everybody around us. And one just hopes 2021 will be a far, far, far better year.
Bertrand Allemand, it was middle of March in this country when the government announced, that's it, we're going into full lockdown. It lasted till the 11th of May, but travel from the US and China has yet to resume properly. First of all, describe for us how your 2020 has been.
Well, it started amazingly well because we have a 5-year-old agency, and this was to be really the takeoff year for our business. And we were building a community of local agencies between France and the UK and Italy and the Netherlands and Spain. So we started the year full of hope. And it was a little bit hard to acknowledge that there was a brutal end after just 2.5 months. And then we've quickly decided that we can't just be waiting forever. And we started to keep giving tools and sharing our national heritage here in France and our love and passion for our history and culture by giving tools online, which seemed to be the only way to communicate with an audience that usually crosses oceans and seas and continents to come to us. Well, we decided that we would send them virtual postcards.
Has your experience on this,
videos.
Bertrand, has your experience on this been the same as for us in the newsroom? We kind of had the sense back in March that we were so cut off all of a sudden. It was so brutal that everybody wanted to be online all the time. People were rushing to watch whatever they could. And then people got sick a little bit of screens.
That is correct. But maybe the difference with you who already are in the world of news, we as guides were used to be in palaces, in museums, in gardens, outside. So it took us a bit of a time to understand how the technology would work and how to be better at filming and editing, etc. So I think we were ready when people started to be a little bit fed up with screens. So I'm not sure we were perfect on time with that. So we decided not to overflood, YouTube and other social medias, etc. And we've decided to concentrate to one tour per week on Saturdays, exactly the same time, etc. And so people can join us and ask questions to their guides, etc. But not something every day and constantly send newsletters, etc. So we want it to be easy on everyone.
What does the audience want? Do they want, when they go on these tours these days, to see landmarks that point to past pandemics? Or on the contrary, do they want to see images of places that conjure the image of crowds the way they were before and forget all about this bad news that we have here?
I think it's a very good question you're asking, because the question here is, what do people look for when they travel? Is it landmarks? Is it just being away from home? And something we've learned, maybe we knew it, but we didn't pay attention to it enough probably, is that when people travel, they're looking for meeting other people and meeting other cultures. And so on our tours, we thought at first that we have to have the best footage and the best image at the best time of famous monuments. But to be clear, talking about our experience, we're guides, we're not filmmakers, so we're never going to have the best images. But what we can offer is a dialogue, and even though it's not face-to-face and in real life, what people wanted the most was to connect with locals. And most of their questions was not about who built the Louvre or how many meters or feet high is the Eiffel Tower, but it's how are you? How are you doing? What's the current situation in France? What it's like to be in Paris in those times? And so that's something that is really persistent in our tools still today, is that people are using this hour with a guide to travel a bit. They see nice images and hear stories, but it's a way to connect with someone from a different country, and that's what we see the most.
And Benoit Panel, I'll bring you in on this. That's effectively what's happened to everybody throughout the world, kind of like what we did with Sunny at the beginning of the show. We trade notes. Oh, I'm in Paris. What's it like in Oslo? What's it like in the Canary Islands? How did you get over? We're all trading notes, it seems, and we all, both at the same time, wish we could travel and want to know what it's like elsewhere.
I'm sorry, didn't get it.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, I was asking you this urge to travel and to trade notes on what it's like elsewhere. Are you feeling it?
Yeah, of course, as I'm experiencing it right now personally. But so I think the health context and travel restrictions reminded us also how much we value travel, how much we are missing it, and how much it can be sort of essential to our happiness, to escape the everyday life and experiencing freedom that allows us to grow as a person.
It's interesting. You mentioned the word freedom. Since Homer wrote the Odyssey, the urge to roam has been chronicled in country music songs, road movies, travel blogs. In the iconic 1957 Beat Generation novel On the Road, Jack Kerouac writes, "I was surprised as always by how easy the act of leaving was and how good it felt. The world was suddenly rich with possibilities." You're saying, Benoit, it's all about freedom?
Well, it's a human desire and a human need, yes.
And do you feel as though you have less freedom at the end of 2020?
Of course. Look at what have been your day-to-day life this last year. We just accepted, and because we have to, because it's in our global interest. But we accepted new norms and new laws that would have been like a nightmare story 1 year ago.
So, Yelena Kekmanovic, you're listening to the rest of the panel here. Do you think to yourself, well, here they are going on with their first world problems? Or are we pointing to something that's almost innate in us, that we are nomadic animals, perhaps, more than we think, and not so sedentary?
I think we are. Deep down, we are nomadic creatures who crave adventures, who crave things happening to them, connecting with different people, connecting with different experiences, reaching out beyond ourselves. I think that is very much a part of our nature. And I think that, paradoxically, in the last maybe couple of decades, due to the development of all the digital tools and so forth, our travel has become little less, I feel, adventurous than usual, because we are, we have Google Maps everywhere, we can pre-plan everything, we can pre-organize everything and so forth. So, it's almost as if, our intolerance for uncertainty has gone a bit up, and we've tried to, even make the travel as predictable as possible. And you hear people coming back to, same beach in Cancun year after year after year. And, I wonder now, this experience that has thrown us into exact opposite, where we really can't move, can't go anywhere. We have no experience of awe and excitement and joy, and we are stuck in this sameness and stagnation. If that's going to reawaken, in a way, our thirst for, pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones, in a way. And I'm hopeful by nature. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, because you heard earlier Bertrand Dallemont saying how he was surprised that people watching his virtual tours were interested in reaching out and not going with the formulaic tour that just runs off the checklist of famous landmarks. Does that surprise you?
Well, I am optimistic by nature, I was going to say, even though as a psychologist, I deal mostly with people who struggle. But I think, I believe in this innate ability of all of us to recreate ourselves and recharge ourselves and sort of rethink our lives. And so I'm very glad to hear that, actually, that people are interested in connecting. That kind of fits with this idea that, we know from a subfield of psychology called positive psychology, that people are happier, they derive more happiness from experiential things rather than material purchases, right? We have found this over the years again and again and again. Getting your new Xbox or Ferrari, even though you think it might make you really happy, it's going to make you less happy than a fantastic travel or experiences, even on a smaller scale. And so the hypothesis why that is that actually during experiential activities we connect with other people, and we also have stories to tell. And so later on in retelling, about our enjoyment of the experiences, we tell stories and we connect even in the future with people. So a recent study actually found that even in anticipating positive events in our lives, whether it's material purchases or experiences like travel, we are happier when we anticipate, plan, think about future travel, imagine future travel, let's say, talk to people about future travel. So while we can't travel now, as I say, what hasn't been taken from us is, ability to dream about travel. And it turns out to dream about travel and anticipate it also brings happiness and other positive emotions. So I think, there's definitely something to it. And if we can do it virtually and connect with other people, of course, even better.
Virtually or connect with other people. Yeah, talk about dreaming about travel. We missed getting away so much that 2020 was the year some of us got on planes just for the sake of it. In October, this Qantas flight departed from Sydney. It went sightseeing, went to Byron Bay, the Gold Coast, Australia's Great Barrier Reef, before landing, guess where? Back in Sydney. At least that journey went airborne. Solange Mougin tells us about an entirely different travel experience that was, well, less than virtual, if you will.
International departures to nowhere. Lining up to get your boarding pass and passports checked. Going through the motions of getting on a flight. All of that is very real. But the destination is not. In this Taiwanese airport, there is check-in and security lines, and even boarding with stewardesses to guide you to your seat. Except the plane won't leave the tarmac. It's a fake flight, to bring a bit of happiness to those who have been jonesing for a jet plane adventure.
Before, I used to travel abroad 2 to 3 times a year, so I feel lucky to have been selected for this fake trip.
Organizers say some 7,000 people applied to take part in the experience. Some 60 were selected to sit on the tarmac for 15 minutes before deboarding. A reminder of what travel is like and a marketing success for the Taiwanese airport.
We want to take advantage of this period where there aren't very many international flights to allow people who have never left Taiwan or those who are tired of being home to be able to take part in this experience.
The Taiwanese government is still advising its citizens not to travel abroad unless absolutely necessary. And air travel in the country has dropped by over 60%. So until those restrictions are lifted and the coronavirus is brought in check, Songshan Airport says they'll continue offering these fake flights, ones where at least your bags can't get lost.
Sunny Kapoor, would you see yourself as one of those who would get on board a plane because you missed it so much?
Yes and no. I probably wouldn't have done this particular thing at all, but I can very well see why people would. It's as a previous guest was saying, it's about what travel and the idea and the imagination about travel does to your brain. And for viewers who haven't read Pico Iyer, the travel writer, in particular his book, The Art of Stillness, I very strongly recommend that. One of the things that has kept me sane throughout now, what Pico Iyer says is when we travel particularly to new exotic locations, there is an overstimuli of sounds, of views, of sights, of smells that subconsciously, come into our psyche. But of course, it's quite, and especially if you're doing work travel, business travel, it's quite hurried, and you never really get the time to reflect on it. So what Pico Iyer does when he travels for work as a travel writer, he goes, travels someplace, then comes and spends more than twice the time trying to recreate those experiences in his head. And every time he thinks about what he did when he traveled, he finds new precious details, new smells he missed in his conscious memory, new sounds that he heard, things he noticed. And I think that's one very healthy way that people can cope with this present situation. Everybody, most of your viewers would have had fantastic holidays, great memories. And this is the time both to look back, close your head, meditate, think and reflect on those and enjoy that same experience a second, third time for free. And at the same time, as your previous speaker was saying, to actually anticipate and make plans of what you would do when things do normalize in 2021, 2022. And I think that's a very healthy way of keeping sane. And to the extent, this idea of going, boarding a plane and getting out and coming back home, or even as, the big craze in East Asia of just eating airplane food, right? To the extent it helps trigger those chain of thoughts, connect you with that parts of your mind, which are associated with travel and adventure. It's a good thing.
And a year ago, Sonny, we were talking about how we had to reduce our carbon footprint and not travel so much. Well, a virus has done it for us, but when it's all over, will you just be dying to get on whatever plane you can, or will you pick and choose, for instance, what conferences you go to?
Well, two separate things. So I think so, irrespective of my personal choices, the world of business travel and conferences would have changed. I think the baseline demand for business travel would have structurally fallen after this crisis with the discovery of fantastic online business So that's going to sort itself out partly. Second, in terms of personal choices, I mean, I sadly have family in 3 continents, so I have no choice but to travel. But I think a lot of people will make different choices, and one must separate what is definitely going to be a temporary spike, people willing to break the chains, break free travel, to what will be the next baseline for where travel will settle. But even if travel does go back to as it was in 2019, 2020 would have been, I think, the year of, or 2019 would have been the year of peak emissions. 2020 would have been the year where climate change reached a new level of awareness, where climate risk became one of the fastest rising issues in terms of global consciousness in finance and macroeconomics, etc. So I think that 2020, partly relating to the pandemic, partly relating to us being able to see blue skies, breathe pollution-free air, see what a pollution-less world would look like, has made a permanent impact in tackling climate change.
Benoit Panel, at YesCapa, you offer what we heard Yelena describe as experiences, right? Getting in an RV, a camper van, and traveling around. Is it? Would you say, to follow up from what Sony was just saying, a way of having a slow holiday or a fast holiday?
Well, I do think that is perfect solution for slow tourism, because it's really the consume actor. Like everybody is handling his holidays at the pace he wants to do it. And it's a tool of freedom. A camper van and motorhome is the perfect tool of freedom. So after, it will depend how people want to organize their holidays. We have bookings, for instance, from Australian people, and they have 1 month to travel all around Europe. So this kind of crazy race. After that, and particularly this summer, we had so many people that were booking camper vans in regions that was not so famous. People were looking for quiet areas because of COVID risks, and they were looking for loneliness. They were looking for traveling at a slow pace, and that was really something new we experienced this year.
It's something new, you're saying?
Really, yeah. This level of bookings in regions that usually are not the most attractive, that was really a change in 2020.
Do you think humanity may be changing?
Well, I think it was really the pandemic risk that was the first motivation for that. But many people will have experienced that due to the conditions, and probably will have fine qualities in this new holidays plan, and so we'll revert to it.
Yelena Kekmanovic, do you sense a trend that people want to go more off the beaten track?
I hear people talking about it, right? These days, few of us are going anywhere. However, I hear people talking about doing something different, which often means off the beaten path. Even in terms of micro adventures, we call them. People who I have friends, I have patients who are not nature people, they're not big hikers, and that just the lockdowns and living very, again, same predictable lives stuck in the city here in DC has led them to want to do something different, to cross this imaginary border, and so they start with the backyard, then park is next, and maybe the nearby mountains follow. It is. For them, it's off the beaten path. So I think it's very subjective what's off the beaten path for any given person. But I have noticed, people just kind of rethinking, okay, we need something to jolt us out of this, psychological, almost physical and psychological immobility. And so, I've heard people talking about it and becoming really creative, creating these micro adventures, which really you can create whether it's, deciding to go see monuments at night in D.C., which normally tourists do, but I see now people from D.C. doing it. We have this expression in my country of origin, ex-Yugoslavia, get to know your own city or your own country to love it better. So I think that, people are doing that and finding that even by doing these, small or micro adventures, their horizons can increase at least a little bit. Mark Twain, when traveling in Europe in the second part of 19th century, he was traveling around Mediterranean mostly. He observed that the travel, especially travel which gets you in contact with foreign people and foreign things, is fatal to prejudice and bigotry and narrow-mindedness. Which is, really interesting to me, because I think, during this time when we've kind of hunkered down and kind of stayed in our own silos, that politicians have, in a way, misused the current circumstance to increase this idea of fear of other and prejudice in a way, and bigotry and so forth. And, and we know from psychological research that actually traveling more and living in foreign countries increases trust in humanity and just empathy generally, and kind of this sense of, we are all, after all, similar human beings. So I wonder if, now having kind of been forced to hunker down and to not be exposed to adventures, people are realizing how important this is. And, they're starting with, again, micro adventures. And then maybe as the time goes by and slowly, the travel restrictions lift, maybe there will be this new thirst for doing travel again differently, and really immersing yourself is in all the sights, as we said, and tastes and so forth of people other than yourself.
Yeah, in The Innocence Abroad, Mark Twain's book, the Americans at the beginning of the book, Bertrand Dallemande, they do behave a bit, they do play to stereotypes, shall we say. Do you have a sense, first of all, interesting point Yelena made, are you getting Parisians who are taking the place of those foreigners who used to go on your tours?
Actually, yes. I think it's what was said about going off the beaten path really depends on who you are, and also when we're talking. Because for locals, visiting Paris and museums, etc., is kind of going off the beaten path, because these places have been overcrowded for a while, and so if you're a local, obviously you're going to postpone your visit to the Louvre, to the Eiffel Tower, to Versailles, etc., because you think, well, I'll be waiting for better conditions, better moment to visit. In 2020 and most probably 2021 is this moment where you can visit your own city without, and I'm talking for Paris here, but without having too many people. But at the same time, off the beaten path can be some place you think is overcrowded, so you never go there. And for other people, it can also be the neighborhood they live in. That's correct.
And to the point that was made earlier by Sunny Kapoor in this discussion, that when we look at now in this in this strange world that we're in at this point, where we've been confined, do you feel as though, and we've been breathing this fresh air during confinement? It was the one positive, right? We heard the birds in Paris. We breathed fresh air. There was this talk when we came out of lockdown that, people are going to start moving out of Paris. I know in New York City, there's this fear that all those who fled, who have the money to flee to the country, won't be returning somehow. Do you sense as though these major cities will somehow not be the same once the pandemic is over?
Well, it's a hard question. I think we've all learned in 2020 that it's pretty hard to foresee what the future is going to be like, because it changes so rapidly, so quickly all the time. But most definitely, probably what we're going to see in Paris is both a big city and a very touristy city. Well, most of the time it's two type of cities. And so what I think we will see here is that if there is a bit less tourism in our city, and people who are coming to visit Paris and who take the chance and who really want to come to see Paris, let's say in 2021, it's because they are interested in discovering the life here and some sites, etc., and not just to tick boxes and to say, okay.
Because the criticism that was made, Bertrand, that's been made for years, is that Paris is what the French call une ville musée, a museum city. That is to say, rents are high, a lot of apartments are often unoccupied. So you have all these tourist attractions, but a lot of the old neighborhoods don't have as much life and soul as they used to. Is that going to be accelerated now?
I don't think so. I think, on the contrary, that we are going to see some kind of a change in that situation where we will have less visitors, which is maybe not a good news for business, but it can be a good news for living standards for us locals. And with less pressure from mass tourism, then as locals we'll be more welcoming to the fewer visitors who will decide to come here, maybe spend a week instead of a weekend, or 2 weeks instead of a week, and get into this mode of slow tourism, and see that you can't see all of Paris in 2 days and just do Disneyland, the Louvre, and another place. And I think if travelers, and that's for people coming to Paris, but also for Parisians who travel a lot, but if we start to travel to pay attention to the people in the city we travel to, or the habits, the customs, etc., I think we will travel better. And as travelers, we will be better seen by locals. And I do think that even us Parisians can start to be happy to see travelers coming to our city.
Sunny Kapoor, your reaction to that?
Well, I think there's definitely, I think, more in the United States where, the suburban areas are far more sort of better developed. There has been some trend towards a movement of, young urban professionals, people with kids moving out of the city center. And I think it's more to do with the fact that remote working has been normalized. And even if it's not going to be, 100%, more and more firms and even governments will allow for 2 or 3 days of remote work. So I think a lot of people might make different lifestyle choices, particularly in well-developed cities, particularly those that might be seen to be, overcrowded and claustrophobic. And having better access to nature is an additional benefit of that. But I think one important thing, one positive thing that's going to come out of 2020 is, in some ways, this is the first time that every single living human being is having some form of shared experience, right? I mean, even in the world wars, we call them world wars, but they were not actually global. Large parts of the world was completely unaffected. And with COVID, every single living human being, you run into someone from a tiny village in Uruguay, in Nepal, in 5 years from now, and you instantly connect, talking about human connection. You can start talking about, hey, what did you do in COVID? What was your experience like? And I think one hopes that we are going to end up with, more shared sense of global identity, humanity, from this experience of adversity that every single living human being is going through in some form or the other.
Yeah, but that experience, as we saw in the spring, was very different. Some stayed put. Others had no choice but to hit the road when India's government suddenly announced lockdown on March 23rd. The World Bank estimates at least 40 million migrant workers were impacted, Sunny. And what's going to be the lasting consequence of this? Some say it was the biggest migration since partition that was witnessed in the spring. I don't know if that's an exaggeration or not.
I don't think it's an exaggeration, actually. India is 5 times as populous, or 4 times as populous as it was during the partition. So it's probably true. But I think, it's going to be, so 2021, I'm not one of those who thinks 2021 is all going to be a bed of roses. It's going to be one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back across the world. It's going to be very asymmetric. It's going to be false hope and sudden positive surprises, bouts of euphoria. It's going to be a very, very volatile year. I don't think we'll settle into a new normal, at least for 2 or 3 years. But like I said, I mean, there are positive aspects. Another positive aspect, besides that idea of shared identity, the sudden prioritization of sustainability and environment is, what we've done on vaccine development, right? I mean, vaccines used to take years and years to make. I think the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine, I don't remember which one, was made over a weekend. Imagine. So I think I'm willing to stick my neck out and say that because of 2020, many, many more lives will be saved over the next 5 years than have been lost directly as a result of COVID, simply because of the forced advances that we have been forced to confront in public health, in awareness, in the infrastructure that will need to be developed to deliver vaccines to everybody, and at the speed at which future vaccines for other diseases, including many neglected tropical diseases, will now be put through the system because of all of the accelerated development. So there are positive lessons to be learned.
An accelerated sharing of information. Sunny, in 5 years' time, you'll probably be spending more time than now on screens, even though you probably spend a lot, right? So my question is, will that be a good thing or a bad thing for you as a person?
I think it's both. To the extent I don't leave my kids away, and I'm able to be home, that's a good thing. To the extent that, what it does to my psyche, what it does to my psychology, what it does to my mental health, how much I end up being excessively on Twitter or Facebook, if they still exist, it might be a negative thing. It's too soon to tell because COVID has brought forward what was going to be a likely future by a number of years, maybe by as many as 5 years. And what it will do to rewiring our brains, our sense of welfare, sense of self-worth and everything else, it's too early to say. But one point that one of the speakers made was very important, which is a lot of serendipity has been taken out of life. That's one thing I enjoyed the most. Unexpected encounters, unexpected things. And the more you are in front of a screen, the more you're in a controlled environment, the less you find those serendipitous experiences. And that's one great human adventure, creativity that we'll be missing out on.
Yeah, Yelena Kekmanovic, having covered more than one Cannes Film Festival, for instance, you just can't do it virtually because, the deals are made at the party by when you bump into so-and-so. And that's how the movie industry works. I know it's for a lot of businesses that's true. How's this being in front of screens all the time affecting us?
Well, not really well, I have to say. It is we who have been able to transfer online in terms of our work, and I work as a psychotherapist, as a professor, and both those endeavors we were able to shift online. So we do teletherapy or telehealth, and we teach online. And so, again, we've been incredibly lucky to have been able to do that, and it certainly is better than nothing. And it's been really interesting to watch, our students and our patients also adjust to that. At first, they were very reluctant, and some even stopped therapy, for example, of our existing patients and said, well, that's not for me. This is just acute stressor, and this is going to all pass within a couple months, when we all believed it would pass in a couple of months in March. And then a couple of months down the road, when we all realized this is a long haul, they started calling back up, and really most of them have now transferred to online therapy. And it's actually, in the end of the day, better than I think a lot of us psychotherapists predicted, for example. And, this is a very intimate profession where you're really connecting with people and having to feel and understand their emotions. And, of course, it's not the same as sitting in front of them in the therapy room. But I have to say it has probably accelerated our transformation in this ability to do online therapy and also have bettered our skills in doing this. Something, again, as one of your speakers said, would have happened anyway probably to some extent, but really accelerated, pushed us into having to do this. And I think in the future what's going to happen is you're going to have a combination of, for example, people doing psychotherapy in person and then to some extent online, which is, again, not ideal, but I would think that most of us found it to be slightly better than we would have anticipated if you asked us a year ago, 2 years ago, oh, how is online therapy?
And just one final question on this. One final question on this, Yelena. Sorry to interrupt, but just because we're running short on time.
No.
You use the word acceleration.
Yes.
Yeah, and what you describe is in the name of efficiency, technology is enabling us to be smart about when we travel and when we stay put. But this acceleration, it gets back to Sunny Kapoor's point. How do we slow down? How do we slow down?
Yeah. Well, I think, paradoxically, this time has also afforded us opportunity to slow down because a lot of non-essential stuff, in a way, has been taken away from us. So the everyday busyness, everydayness of life has been taken away to some extent for most of us. So, all this, different engagements we had with people, different events and so forth, life has dwindled down to the essentials. I had a patient the other day say to me that it's been, eye-opening for her. She always felt the pressure that she had to say yes to every social engagement and had the fear of missing out and so forth. And this has, in a way, forced her to step back and reflect on her life, in her case, on her social life, and really, think about, which ones of my friends and my relations are really important, and then deliberately and thoughtfully devote time to those, now online and eventually in person as well, and really prune the others. And I feel that that's a kind of that can be a metaphor for broader life, whether it's travel, whether it's relating to other people, whether it's relating to our endeavors and, pursuing careers and passions in our life. So I think that it has afforded us at this time, stepping out of this everydayness. Again, the famous existential psychologist Irvin Yalom borrows Heidegger's idea here that when we are thrown sort of from this everydayness, we go into this ontological mode and start to ask questions kind of, what's the point of all of this? Why am I here? What am I doing? More kind of existential questions. And I think that this time has afforded us that. And I have hope that we will be more thoughtful and deliberate and focus on really what matters. And how do we go on and live life more consistently with our values?
All right, and that will be our final word. I want to thank you so much, Yelena Kekmanovic, for being with us from Washington. I want to thank Sunny Kapoor in Oslo, Bertrand Talmont in Paris, and Benoit Panel in the Canary Islands. We want to thank you for being with us here for this special year-end edition of the France 24 debate.